So welcome to the playback, if you're watching on the playback. But if you're here now, right now in the room, welcome to the live question and answers. Dr. Abs, do you want to give yourself a little introduction?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here again, actually. So I started off originally in just dentistry. That's what I graduated in. And then from there, when I started treating patients, I noticed that the knowledge is extremely limited when you're only in one field in medicine. And so I just started noticing lots of changes in my patients. So for instance, I noticed that even the people that brushed well, they had terrible teeth or terrible health. I noticed that people with less teeth had more medications. People that had more muscle mass as they were very old had more mobility, had less medications, less diseases, all these sorts of things. And then I looked at the fact that some people who were very obese would, try their best to eat the right things. But even when they ate the right things, in inverted commas, they were still obese. So that's when I started to go and look into things like obesity and nutrition. That led me to metabolism. And then that led me into the world of mitochondrial function and all those things. So now I'm also a consultant in biotech research, specializing in mitochondrial metabolism and function and amino acid technology. So from that, we look at cancer, nutrition, and aging because they're all functions of mitochondrial function and metabolism.
Excellent.
We've got someone in the car. Let's hope we don't distract them too much.
Selena just left. I've just been with Selena now at the Celtic Lodge. So we arranged this. We just started arranging a monthly meetup again. So I can see Selena's made a sharp exit to join the live. So fantastic. Only because I said that Dr. Abs was joining. She never joined. She never joined before for me. So,
So Dr. Abs, you mentioned amino acid technology there. I mean, what does that mean to the layperson?
So amino acids are just the bricks of protein to the layperson, and to the layperson, it just the common thought is, well, we just eat protein and we just break them down and we need it. But it's much, much more complex than that. And I'll give you a clue. And I'm sure Richard will back me up on this, that the world of bodybuilding, powerlifting, weightlifting, all those kind of sports, there's probably a million different supplements you can get. But when you look at the supplements specifically on amino acids, so for example, let's take branched chain amino acids. People take that to build muscle. If you look at a BCAA product, there's always a ratio. It's always, roughly speaking, 2 to 1 to 1, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. They're all individual amino acids. And the technology is the understanding that amino acids are as unique as different types of bricks to build a house. And so if you can control the ratio and the amount and which ones you're using and in certain ways, you get completely different effects. So if you would take a BCAA product off the shelf in that ratio versus making one yourself in a completely different ratio, even though the amino acids are the same, you get a completely different response. And that's why, for instance, when we look at the way mitochondria make things or break things, you have to understand things like amino acids, because it's in response to amino acid profiles around the mitochondria.
Cool. And what's this got to do with longevity?
Because longevity is basically a side effect of how well everything in the cell is working. Again, to put it in lay terms. So if you're looking at, for instance, the function of the cell, what you're looking at is how well it can make all the proteins it needs to make, which includes enzymes, which includes muscle, which includes hair, which includes connective tissue, all these sorts of things. And when you're looking at longevity, if you trace it back, deeper, you essentially get to cell function, which is all determined by mitochondria and DNA and all these sorts of things. So if you understand that and you look after that process, and carnivore diet is, in terms of as far as diet is concerned, the best thing you can do to look after that process, and then you do lots of other things to go alongside, then you don't just get the benefit of a carnivore diet, you get the benefit of being as fully healthy as possible, physically, mentally, and for as long as possible too.
Cool. I'm leaving little gaps in case Richard wants to dive in, because I'm more than happy for Richard to just to say his two penneth.
Hey, this is a live for a special guest, so I take a step back and let everyone else do the talking. But I'm surprised that we don't have a lot of questions there. Surely you guys have got some questions on longevity. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity to ask an expert in the field. So check those in there. What I wanted to ask really quickly is something that I was trying to explain to somebody recently in regards to what you mentioned during the live about you were dealing with patients who had a bad plaque buildup, but their teeth were in good condition bar the plaque. So this whole thing about plaque causing, decay and all this sort of stuff. I couldn't remember the intricacies that you went into. I mean, until someone's got a question, can you explain that? So I was trying to explain basically that all we need to do is to brush our teeth with just water, which is how I've brushed my teeth for quite some time. Now and again, I'll use MCT oil. I don't know why I started doing that, but I don't know if it's doing any good other than the fact that you could be absorbing some of the MCTs through the gums. But it does act for me as a substance to put on the brush, which makes me feel a little bit better when brushing. But now I've got into the routine of just brushing with my brush and water, which it sounds counterintuitive because every other dentist will tell you that you need fluoride in your toothpaste, you need toothpaste. But then something struck a chord with me when you mentioned through our evolutionary period, if we were in a situation where we didn't have fluoride and all these other compounds to protect our teeth, how are we still here? How has man survived all of these years? Because without your teeth, you can't eat. We can't chew meat and kill animals, and we can kill an animal, but we can't break it down and chew on it, and we can't. Who are we going to get to chew our food to pass on to us? It doesn't work that way. So, could you go into?
Yeah, sure.
Brilliant.
So I think when you look at the fact that what you've just said there, we never had fluoride, and yet we were able to eat sufficiently to become the apex predators of the entire planet. Now people talk about how much we need fluoride, but that's in the context of all the disease we have. And all the disease we have is, I think everyone in this Zoom and this community would agree, because our diet has changed so much. And so when we go back to a carnivore diet, we are no longer in the demographic that is being tested in all these studies that look at the benefits of fluoride. And that's the problem, not just in nutrition, but in any kind of longevity research. People, all the subjects in all the experiments that have ever been done, there's no control for the diet. And that's part of the reason why you can never say anything will make you live longer, because there's never been an experiment to do it. But when you look at what you said earlier about, the plaque not necessarily causing an issue, it's understanding that plaque is a collection of bacteria that are surrounded by a biofilm. And the death of those bacteria come from disturbing the biofilm, which is what the point of a physical toothbrush is. You also have to understand the metabolic pathways of those bacteria. So, for example, Streptococcus mutans is one of the most commonly implicated bacteria in dental problems. And what happens is when we feed these things, such as refined carbohydrates, part of their life cycle involves the production of weak acids, such as lactic acid. These acids can demineralize the teeth. And that's how we get things like tooth decay, for instance, because the demineralization allows the structure now to be vulnerable and susceptible to damage. And that's when things start to decay from the inside. And when we're going carnivore and we're not feeding refined carbohydrates into these oral bacteria, they're like, and this is an opinion now technically, because this has never been, no one's done a dental experiment on carnivore patients. But my opinion is you're just not going to get that same life cycle. You're not going to develop the issues that come from typical Western diets, because simply you're not on one. And when we look at even gum disease, I think the most famous example of what carnivore diet can do, you look at Jordan Peterson, probably one of I would say the first internationally famous mainstream, or known by the mainstream people, to come out and say they've done this diet. He's himself admitted, my gum disease went away and my dentist couldn't believe what happened. And he had many, from what I understand, he had many rounds of treatment for it on a standard Western diet. Nothing happened. And so there are too many anecdotes now to not suggest that carnivore diet has massive benefits for your oral and dental health. And when it comes to specifically the brushing and what you brush with and things, I've got a video coming soon on that, but just do everyone watching, just do a short thought experiment with me. Let's pretend you're brushing your teeth, or let's pretend you've got two people. Person number one you have the best toothpaste in the world, whatever it is, toothpaste or toothpaste alternative, think of anything you like. But the actual physical brushing, the contact with the bristles and the teeth is not that controlled or great. That means you're not dislodging that plaque biofilm. So it's still there to cause demineralization. Whereas let's say you've got no toothpaste like yourself, just water, but your brushing technique is so good that you reach everywhere and you disturb all the biofilms. Well, even though there's no toothpaste, because you've disturbed all the biofilms, no bacteria are left behind to actually cause any issues. So everyone that asks, what is the best thing to brush with? My advice is you're barking up the wrong tree. You should be worried about physical dislodging of plaque biofilm, whether it's with water or toothpaste or CA oil or anything like that. At the end of the day, even if it's just plain dry brush, if you physically disturb that and kill it off, what can it do? Nothing. So the concentration should be on the brushing technique and what you're brushing with rather than what is on the brush. And that's why I suspect even you're using toothbrush and water is not really caused, well, I haven't given you a checkup or anything, but I'm assuming it's not causing you any toothache or anything like that. And the reason this is important is because when you look at the link between oral health and systemic health, it's too big to ignore. So I think one of the most famous people that, kind of ignited the thought of carnivore and our ancestral diet, I would say go back to 1914 when Weston Price and his partner were traveling the world looking at indigenous tribes with no toothbrush and no toothpaste. And yet their diet gave them completely decay-free, gum disease-free teeth, and they had great systemic health. And so that correlation between oral health and systemic health, to put it in a long answer, that's another reason why I was so fascinated with other areas of medicine and longevity as well. So focus on the brush, focus on the brushing technique, and less on what you put on the brush would be my advice.
So what sort of technique would you recommend?
So I would suggest, I'm going to actually type it in the chat here so people can Google it. It's got a technical name. It's called modified BAS. Essentially, it's a way of, if you imagine you're clearing under a carpet, you're getting the bristles underneath that carpet to just sweep underneath without disturbing the carpet. You're doing that with your bristles under your gum line. Obviously not with force because they'll damage it. But once you do that, that's how you're disturbing the plaque biofilm. And once you look at the connection between the mouth and the heart, I know we talk about the gut-brain axis, gut-skin axis, all these things, but there's connection between the oral health and everything else. So for instance, if you have a procedure in your mouth, dentists, even if they don't talk to you about it, they're in their mind, and I know because I was there, we are considering things like infective endocarditis, where infections can track from the mouth to the heart and latch onto a heart valve and cause things like that. So the better you look after your oral health, there is literally direct link to everything else.
Brilliant. We have actually got some questions now. So we will ask some questions from people in the room. They start off quite gentle and then they get a bit more nuanced. So Josh is asking, the mainstream say brush teeth twice a day. Do you agree, or is once enough? Is there a natural toothpaste you recommend, or is water just fine with an electric toothbrush? Well, we covered that last bit, but the first bit, twice a day or once a day?
So twice a day is the official recommendation based on a typical Western diet, typical Western eating frequency. Now, I still maintain that anyway. However, you should never stick to a number. And this is where a lot of people get things wrong. And I've witnessed it myself over the years. They think, well, I'll brush twice, everything should be fine. No. If you clear the biofilm, then you are fine. If that means brushing after every meal because of what you're eating, there's lots of stringy bits in meat and it has to be cleared out in between, then that means more than 2 for you. You shouldn't aim for a number. You should aim to clear everything. And that's for some people, not everyone, that's a dangerous perspective to have, to aim for a number. So what I do and what I would recommend to people, especially on carnivore, because of the fibrous protein that we're eating and how, because the fibers are long, if a bit of it gets stuck in between the teeth and you pull the bit sticking out, it might snap and the bit that's in between the teeth is still left in between the teeth, which is annoying. So I would recommend people get a water flosser, which fires a jet of water in between the teeth and then it flushes it out the other side. And that's much more useful for someone on a carnivore diet. So if you do that after every meal, it takes like literally 15, 20 seconds for the whole mouth. There's there we go. Stephen's holding some stuff. So stuff like that for in between the teeth is great. Now, what's another thing you can do on that is the water flosser, which is even quicker. And if you do that whenever you finish eating, there's very little you have to worry about, because when it comes to actually physically brushing, there's not a whole lot of biofilm left to dislodge. And you can get them very cheap. Don't be spending more than about £15-20 on Amazon. And you can have one that will last many, many years. They've got a little water compartment. Fill that up. It will take a few goes to get used to it, because it will fire all over your face or your back of your throat or something when you first do it. But you get used to that after a few tries, and it makes a big, big difference. I've had patients whose gum disease has stabilized even on a standard diet, simply because they started using that after each meal. And when you say the thought of brushing after each meal, I can't bother to go into the bathroom, do all this. But if you keep a water flosser and it takes 10-15 seconds, very, very easy. So then the next part of the question was, is there a natural toothpaste you recommend? Or I think we've covered that as well.
Yes. I think one of the things I held up, by the way, for the people listening on the audio podcast, is like a little flosser thing, which is a plastic sort of C shape that you can put in your pocket, and also a TP sort of interdental brush, basically. That's what I use. I tried the water flosser, but I did spray it over my face too much, and I found it easier to just put these in my pocket. And my dentist is more than happy. I have to lie to my dentist, because they say, are you still cleaning your teeth twice a day? Because your cleaning is fantastic. And I'm like, yes, but I don't do twice a day. I do it when I feel like I need it. But because after every meal, I do the interdental little brushes and the flossing, I don't really feel like I need to brush my teeth at all. But anyway, Matthew, as always, comes up trumps with some brilliant questions. Happy Thursday. Is this a good, effective recipe for a mouthwash for removing stains on teeth? And if at the end of the program we run out of questions, we can talk about my teeth, because my teeth are atrocious. But anyway, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/8 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of warm water, followed with a plain water rinse.
Interesting. I mean, no mouthwash is really that effective, because if you've got something stuck in between your teeth, mouthwash isn't really going to clear it unless it's on its way out already. And that's why we have things like water flossers, flossettes, like you held up to the screen. So in terms of effective, there's nothing really that's that effective. For cleaning, instruments to clean in between, like the water flosser, is what you need. Mouthwash is effective. Let's say you've got some kind of abscess, some kind of infection. If you get a mouthwash that is, in terms of temperature, as hot as you can take without burning yourself, so pretty hot, and a disgusting amount of salt, but not so much that you vomit, obviously. You start rinsing with that heat and the salt, no harm at all, because it's literally just seawater, basically. And that will try to draw out the infection because of the salt that's in there. So even the baking soda, all that kind of stuff, it's not necessarily needed as in the context of an infection. In the context of stains, first of all, people need to understand there's many, many different types of the stains. And sometimes it's not actually a stain. It can be lots of other things. So I don't think there's any mouthwash that is really going to be effective at stains. And if it looks like it is effective, this is key, don't use it. And I know that sounds weird, but the reason, if it looks like it's effective, it's possibly because there is something wearing away the enamel, and it will look white afterwards. But one day it will never look white again, because you've gone through into the yellow layer, which is dentine. And that's why,
Excellent answer. I'm jumping in there because I want to make sure that Richard is allowed to answer the next question as well as you, Dr. Abs, because
Please.
I think you're underestimating yourself, Richard. People tune in to see you as well. And this is your street.
I tune in for Richard.
It's a team thing. You're right. Dr. Abs is a guest. But I think he would like to hear your opinion on this. Obviously, let's have Dr. Abs first. This is a great question from Lisa. And Lisa, thanks for all the contributions. It's really good. So Lisa's saying, high-dose vitamin D has been shown to reverse serious autoimmune diseases like MS. Given that you are a fan of high vitamin D, how can doses realistically be achieved on a daily basis when vitamin D is generally sold in 5,000 mg? I thought it was actually sold in 500. That might be a typo, because 5,000 mg is actually not that bad, to be honest. But anyway, can we get into that question?
I think they mean IU, international units, not mg.
Yes.
It must be, yeah. So it's generally sold even in up to 10,000. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sponsored, but I'll put in the chat where I buy mine if people want to see. I'll just type it out there. It's called Nature Supps, NATURSUPPS. Again, I'm not sponsored. I just buy it there because it's very cheap. You can get like 180 of the, I think 5,000 or 10,000 for about £6.
Wow.
That's really, really cheap. In fact, for those who are listening and not watching, you won't see this, but here is mine that I keep just in case. So there's a lot there. Now I don't take it very much because I just stay outside. It's summer now. But in terms of treating those diseases, first of all, it's not vitamin D that is doing the treating or reversing. Vitamin D is part of a systemic change. Vitamin D is highly required for the immune system function, which is why people are more likely to get flu, at least statistically speaking, in the winter rather than the summer. But vitamin D on its own does not cure anything. Vitamin D is simply information to the body that the sun is out. That may then cause changes such as nitric oxide production in the skin, the utilization of magnesium and different ions within the body. But it's vitamin D in the context of cofactors, which is what can help treat conditions. And that, for safety reasons, I really have to emphasize that. If you take high-dose vitamin D with no cofactors on its own, there have been cases reported where people have ended up in hospital for hypervitaminosis D. Now, I used to take a not just toxic, but a lethal dose of vitamin D every day. And to give you numbers, I think the daily recommended intake right now, if I'm not mistaken, is 400 or 800 a day, something along those lines. And I was taking 100,000 a day, and I was fine. My blood test showed no imbalances anywhere because I was taking it with the cofactors. So in terms of how can you achieve a higher dose, first of all, make sure that's what you need. I don't know enough information about the individual to say whether that's needed or not, but high doses can be achieved. And that's the website I buy mine from. But high doses, not just can they be achieved, what else is needed in a high dose alongside? So I'm going to reel off a couple of things: magnesium, zinc, selenium, possibly even calcium. All these ions are needed. So do have a look at these things. Vitamin K2. K2 has to be in there. That's your safety insurance policy, basically. All of these things have to be taken at the same time. Now, the issue is it might lead to many, many pills that you take. But if you're on a carnivore diet, great news. You don't necessarily have to shove a load of pills in your face, because if you're eating the right things, you're going to get the right things anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much. But if you're treating those sorts of disorders, it has to be done under medical supervision, I would say. What would you... Yeah, sorry.
Well, I think with the K2 as well, you can even get variations of that. So some people talk about MK4, MK7. It's a longer chain. Obviously, that lasts in the body a lot longer. Interestingly, you mentioned RDAs. There's no RDA for K2. And so this shows how ridiculous RDAs are, because K2 is essential, and a fat-soluble vitamin. That's another clue as well. If you're on a low-fat diet, these things aren't going to work as well because they're fat-soluble. I'm really interested in Richard's opinion, because we've been talking about fermented cod liver oil, and we've been talking about this. You're absolutely right. Getting out in the sun is about the best thing you can do. I will just tell you, I have actually got clients that have trained themselves to not be in the sun because they have believed the scaremongering. Yes, I at least once a month, someone will say, "You're telling me to get out of the sun. I am petrified. My skin will turn to leather." They're pasty white, and their immune system is nowhere near as good as it could be. So I think it's really important to emphasise that getting out in the sun is a really, firstly, a cheap way of getting vitamin D, and actually pretty good for your health. Anyway, Richard, we're both dying to hear. Well, everyone in the room is dying to hear your opinion.
Nobody wants my opinion. I think context is really important when it comes to things like this, because, are you vitamin D deficient is one thing. A lot of these studies are based on healthy people. So when we see healthy people, their levels of vitamin D are higher. And I think what the research has shown me is that if you're metabolically healthy, you naturally have higher levels of vitamin D. But taking vitamin D isn't going to make you healthier unless you're deficient and you need said supplement. But I don't think we can chase that by increasing. I don't think it's something that we should be over consuming if we don't have a requirement for it. It's essential in the body. But much of the benefit that we see from vitamin D, as Dr. Ab said, I believe comes from nitric oxide. As the UVB rays hit the skin, this increases nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a potent vasodilator, directly correlated with longevity. Many of the benefits that we see from the elevated vitamin D come from nitric oxide and not the vitamin D itself. That's not to say the vitamin D isn't important. Low vitamin D levels can cause issues with parathyroid hormone, which can lead to calcium imbalances and so on and so forth. So it's about having everything in balance. If you are deficient, then potentially we could look at taking a vitamin D supplement. But as Dr. Ab says, we can get lots of this vitamin D from nature, the sun, and animal proteins. Animal proteins contain clumps of vitamin D. Vitamin D isn't found in plant form. We can't get vitamin D from plants, but it's found in abundance in animal proteins. We look at peoples from the Antarctic, for example, who have very little sun exposure and their vitamin D levels are perfectly healthy. So there are other ways to obtain this. And I do think that where we originate from geographically may have an impact. I think I'm naturally predispositioned to synthesize most vitamin D from animal proteins opposed to the sun. If you come from a sunnier climate, then it may be the other way around. I'm stuck in a box generally. You guys have heard my box analogy. I'm in an office. This is where I am now. I'm in an office. I've got blinds here, blackout blinds, so I can do the recordings and not be affected by the sun. That's not healthy. I should be out in the sun. I should be grounding. I should be exposing my skin and my eyes to the UVA rays early in the morning and later in the day. But unfortunately, work takes over, so I don't get to do this as often as I should. And I know this is something I need to work on. That said, whenever I've tested vitamin D, they've always been in a very good range. And I put this down to my diet. And I think if you consume an animal-based diet, if you live this lifestyle, then the body will produce everything that we need. So I make supplements. I'm not against supplements, and I think there's a place for them. But we should always try with our diet initially. But I do think the lines have been blurred when it comes to vitamin D. I think you can look at one study, and it can say one thing. You can look at another, and context is really important. But I do believe that we can't. The reversing autoimmune issues, if you have a vitamin D issue, potentially, but if you are healthy, if you were healthy, you wouldn't have an autoimmune issue, would you? But I don't believe that we should be over-consuming vitamin D in supplement form unless we have a deficiency. Many of the benefits are coming from the UVA hitting the skin and the nitric oxide. You're muted, Steve.
I'm muted. Yeah, one of the things I constantly try to tell people is how all linked up it is. So just look at vitamin D. If you have inadequate supplies of K2, for instance, or you have a problem with your gut, so whatever you put in your mouth, if you're putting some fantastic proteins into your mouth and your stomach acid is not great, you've got a problem straight away. But let's say stomach acid is okay, so it gets into your small intestine. You haven't got enough vitamin D. The calcium, for instance, is not going to leave the small intestine and get into the bloodstream. So what happens if that's okay? Well, if you haven't got K2, you're not going to get the calcium out of your bloodstream into the bones, and so on and so on. So it isn't just a case of one thing fixing it. And I think, a big thing that I talk about a lot is the iodine clearance test when we talk about people using iodine drops. Today I had a coach client, I've just taken some iodine drops and I feel amazing. Do you know what? So that shows that works. But we could have actually worked out if she was iodine deficient by doing an iodine clearance test, but we didn't need to because she's been doing it 3 weeks. She feels brilliant. So I'm assuming she's probably a little bit deficient. But this is the way we should be looking at things really holistically rather than, like you say, Richard and Dr. Abs, one thing on its own isn't necessarily going to fix it. And you could actually take, I'm doing a Richard answer here. You could take a mega dose of vitamin D, not get fixed and think, well, it's not vitamin D. Well, yeah, it was, but there was no cofactors. So you need the vitamin D and maybe K2. And again, I don't sell supplements at all, really. So I'm saying this because we've got a diet where we can get K2, we can get vitamin D, like you say, from either outside or from the food. So anyway, great. Susan's asking a question, which I will be frank, I have zero idea what this is. So I'm really looking forward to the answer. I've never asked a question where I have no idea what I'm talking about. So Dr. Abs, for derma rolling, do you prefer 192 needles over 540 needles?
Yes.
That clears that up.
So let me give a full answer. I prefer 192 for people who are new and they need to get used to it slowly. And then once you have gotten used to it, let's say after a couple of times, say a couple of weeks, switch over to 540. It's not a problem. So for those of you that don't know what the question is, I'm sure Stephen's not the only one. Derma rolling is a way that for less than £10, you can give yourself massive amounts of collagen induction in your skin over, months or a year or something like that, that in clinic would cost you many thousands of pounds when you're paying for things like expensive lasers and things like that. So a derma roller is just literally a handle with a barrel on the end that can rotate. And on the barrel are tiny needles that go all the way around. It's like one of those old school lawnmowers that just have a thing that rotates as you push it along, but you're pushing it along the face. And these tiny, tiny, tiny needle pricks are basically what happens when you go to the gym for your muscle. You get these tiny tears, but the needles aren't tearing, in inverted commas. They're just slightly stimulating. And it's not enough to cause a scar or a bruise or anything like that, but it is enough to make a little bit of growth that can heal very, very quickly. And your skin produces massive amounts of collagen. You're creating tiny wounds. It is literally wound healing, but we're hijacking the process to do it on a tiny scale many, many, many times. And so we develop huge amounts of collagen. And if you start learning, I've got a video on my channel specifically going into it, how to do it, technique. I show people the technique. And if you learn to do that and you're regular, that is one of the most directly, cosmetically, facially, anti-aging things you can possibly do. And in terms of value for money, considering they're about £8, I don't think anything beats it, to be honest.
That's fabulous. And that is such a good reason to join the Skool community, you see. $4 a month, and we've just saved you thousands of pounds. Now, for people that have never seen me, because this goes out as an audio podcast, I'm 60, and I reckon I'm going to be trying these things. I'm going to definitely try that and do some before and after pictures, because I can afford 10 quid in a derma roller, and I'll definitely try it. Susan, thank you for that question, because you've opened up a thing for me.
Stephen, well, Richard, you don't know this, but Richard has actually said to me that you're going to be a model at the Carnivore conference, and I'm going to be derma rolling you on stage. I don't know if he's mentioned it.
Yeah. Yes, well, Richard can dream.
You they're meant to know.
I'm up for a demonstration. Anyway, right. Matthew, thank you, Matthew. It's a great moderator on the Skool community, by the way. So always good with some good questions. So it's two parts. Does mouthwash negatively affect oral health long term? And B, is Oral-B dental tape a good option?
So mouthwash isn't negatively going to affect it long term, assuming the mouthwash doesn't have any harmful ingredients. Some will have alcohol, which is essentially, that's why you feel a bit of a burn after some mouthwashes, and it lingers for a while. Listen to that. If that's hurting you, what is that telling you? It's hurting you, and it was hurting everything, and that's the mechanism it's hurting the bacteria. But the side effect is it's going to damage your tissues as well. Chronic usage is going to cause chronic damage over the tissues. Now, I can't give you evidence for that because no one's ever done a long-term study on the use of mouthwash. And part of the reason is because there are so many variables in that, like diet, hence why there's never been a long-term diet study, well-controlled. So we can't say for certain. But if your brushing technique is good and your cleaning in between your teeth is good, you don't even need mouthwash, honestly. You save yourself the money and just focus on the technique instead. Oral-B dental tape, they're all the same. You're paying for the name, you're paying for a slightly minty smell, which adds absolutely nothing whatsoever. Absolutely plain, the cheapest floss you can get is just as good as the most expensive. What makes the difference is the person holding the floss, not the floss itself.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, you snuck in a little bit about the Carnivore Conference, by the way, Dr. Ebbs. Richard, can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, the Carnivore Conference. I'm sure you guys have you'd be mentioned this a number of times. An event on the 14th and 15th of September. some amazing speakers. Stephen, Dr. Abs, and I'll be there also. We've got a fantastic lineup. This is going to be the UK's first carnivore conference, with a bit of a twist. It's going to be an intimate event, a chance to speak with the speakers in between the chats, because it's a weekend event. I know, Dr. Abs, you can't make it. You're away on business on the Saturday, but you're there on the Sunday.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to that. But it's a brilliant opportunity to mix with the speakers, get all your questions asked and answered. There's food supplied, there's accommodation, but one of the biggest takeaways for me with this is we are putting a different spin on it. Now, some of the events that I've been to, they're fantastic. They're brilliant events. You get thrown all this information. That's excellent. What does it mean for me? What are the takeaways? I sometimes leave thinking, well, that was brilliant, but what does it mean? So one of the prerequisites for the speakers is that at the end of the talk, there is going to be a slide or something spoken about the takeaways, the actual actionable takeaways that you can implement yourselves to confer a benefit. It's going to be brilliant. It's the first of its kind, so you don't want to miss that. I'll pop a link in the chat. If you guys can't make it, but you think of you can think of a few of your friends or family who may benefit from that, then get them to book in there. One not to be missed. I'm super excited.
Yeah, and Richard, we're all looking forward to your talk. And I'm a great believer in getting things down to layman's level as well. And what can I physically do about these things? Now, Alison is asking a question. I'm going to repeat it, but I think we have covered it already. Maybe Alison was a bit late into the room. So what is a good brushing technique?
Something where you are sweeping under the gum line, just like you're sweeping under the carpet. So your toothbrush makes this harder or more difficult. And you'll see, I've seen them, adverts for the next generation toothbrush or NASA technology in the bristle. It's nonsense. Please don't ever fall for any of that, okay? On my electric toothbrush, I literally buy the cheapest possible head I can find, because I'm going to be replacing it probably once a month, once every 2 months anyway. So it doesn't really matter. All you want is a round head. Nothing else matters. You get that round head because the roundness of the head matches the roundness of the gum line. And so when you push slightly against the tooth and the bristles splay outwards, you pushed, I don't know if people won't be seeing this on the audio version, but on the video one at least, if you push against the tooth, the bristles push out like this. And when they push outwards, they need to push out and end up under that gum line. And that's how you do it. So you put the bristles at a slight angle, you push like that, and then they lurch under the gum line. And then because it's automatic, it just sweeps everywhere under the gum line at the same time, because the shape of the head is the shape of the gum line. And if you find the modified Bass technique on Google, that'll show it to you. It's honestly not complicated. And anyone that makes you think you're going to need some special device is talking rubbish. My toothbrush was probably £10. My toothbrush heads work out because you have to buy them in a bulk pack, a couple of pounds each. That's it.
Brilliant. Dr. Abs, what would you recommend for enamel discoloration? My daughter is 14 and dentists prescribed Durafat 2800 toothpaste. Told it has been caused by having antibiotics when a baby. Is this correct? They have suggested veneers when 18.
So it can be that. And for those people that are wondering what Durafat 2800 is, 2800 refers to the concentration of fluoride. So by law, if you look on the back of a toothpaste packet, it will probably say 1450 parts per million, because the legal limit is 1500. You can go above that if your dentist prescribes it. So you can go for something like 2800, you can go for 5000. And that is in the guidelines, which is why your dentist is doing it. It's almost a mechanical binary decision. Has a patient got decay or the high risk of decay? Great, let's then prescribe this. Follow this and do this. It's almost like people aren't thinking. This is one of the reasons I left dentistry. You're almost encouraged to not think, because even if you speak out, you get shot back down, because who are you? You're not the guidelines. And so these high fluoride toothpastes are given because people think you are at higher risk. Now, they may be right. You may be at higher risk because you've already got tooth decay, also known as caries. Or maybe you've got some kind of physical disability, which means, you can't use your hands very well. And so your ability to brush is worsened. And so you would also be classed as a higher risk. Lots of risks exist. And so they put that there. Now, they probably also put that there because if the teeth structure on a microscopic level is not great, I won't make it too complex. Let's say it's not great for one reason or another. For example, antibiotics when you were younger, then they're basically just taking precaution. Now, you may have had something like tetracycline antibiotics as a baby or very, very young. What this does is it completely changes the structure inside the tooth to the point where it looks very dark, almost purple sometimes. And so there's nothing really you can do to reverse that. It's been done. That's it. Like you can't change that. Some dentists will try whitening. You can get that on the NHS in this case because it's not for cosmetic vanity. It's because there was a medical issue when you were younger and it's now causing a problem. But when you turn 18, yes, I would also say do that. And I would say if you are going to get veneers, and I basically did a master's certificate program in full mouth reconstruction from the guy that invented how to do it. And so a veneer, if you don't know, is a walk in the park compared to a Tough Mudder, which is full mouth reconstruction. You should never, ever, ever go for a cheap veneer. I implore all of you and anyone you know who is ever thinking about it, it's your teeth, okay? It is your ability to smile and show emotion as a human being. It is what allows you to eat. Just imagine you couldn't eat properly and all you could do was soup. I've seen those patients with my own eyes. I know how much of a massive impact it makes on your life. I'm not saying you're going to lose everything and you're going to be on soup, but imagine you go even just a tiny bit towards that by losing certain teeth. It's a huge psychological impact. And if you go cheap on a veneer and it causes issues because they've not, been paid enough to spend enough time on it, you will pay that price, not in money, but in problems for the rest of your life. And I have seen it. The worst I've seen is a 21-year-old who had such bad issues because they went so cheap. At 21, I had to pull every single tooth out of his mouth. And at 21, he had to put his teeth in when he woke up every morning from the glass holding his dentures. At 21, you should not be spending, realistically, if you want a good job done, less than like $1,000 per veneer. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I know how much it costs. And I personally would never pay less than that if you're going to have a veneer done, because you've got so many materials, you've got so many staff to pay, you've got a separate lab who is making that. Sometimes my cost just to get the veneer made before I even charge the patient at times would be like £300 to £400. And that's not including my material costs, paying my nurse, paying the, keeping the lights on in the surgery, all that kind of stuff. So if you're paying less than $1,000 for that, where are they taking shortcuts? And you wonder why there's so many horror stories of people going to Turkey. No coincidence, this guy that I had to pull every tooth out of, which I remember for the rest of my life, he went to Turkey. So when your child, daughter or son, I don't know what it was, when they turn 18, take them to someone who charges a decent amount, who spends a good amount of time in the consultation with you. That's a good marker to go by. If you're in and out in the consultation, red flag, walk away. Good length consultation with lots of discussion on the pros and cons, including why you're there in the first place biologically in terms of the antibiotics, and wait for the quote. And if it's expensive, if it's at least $1,000 per veneer, even if that's expensive and you can't afford it, I promise you, and I really, really mean this, I can't stress this enough, that is cheaper than paying less at the time and then paying more later on to correct the problems. Please, please, please be willing to spend, even if it means taking a finance plan. That is going to be better for the rest of your life because you want these to last decades, not every 5 years, than any other option. So I hope that's given you some really good, honest advice, Helen.
Yeah. And the good thing is, of course, you're not in practice. You're not selling.
Exactly.
Procedure. It's just from the heart. So that's great.
Yeah.
Lisa's asked a subsidiary question. Corded water flossers are a pain to use. Do you have any suggestions for a cordless water flosser? Maybe just a brand that I could look at.
What I would do is actually paste a link in the chat to one on Amazon. Here we go. You should get that there. Now, it's not an affiliate link, so I'm not doing this to make anything. I've just typed in water flosser to Amazon. If I had to buy another one now, that's what I would get. And the main reason, it's very cheap. and it does exactly the same thing as the things that are more expensive, and that is about £16.
Great. I'll check that out later as well. For people listening on the audio podcast, it will be in the description. Right. Now, this is for Dr. Abs, but Richard, I really want you to chime in on the next couple of questions.
Let's get Richard to answer first on this one.
Yeah, well, there you go. Brilliant. Richard, what do you think how to track improvement on carnivore? Is it better to test glucose levels or ketones? And I would like to answer as well at some point.
You know, I've done both. I don't track either anymore, to be honest. I know Dr. Abs is going to do an experiment for me shortly. Maybe we can speak a little bit about that also. But look, I mean, it depends on what ketones you track in as well. Initially, as we gravitate into the lifestyle, the body is inefficient at creating and utilizing ketones. We can become fat adapted quickly. And I think the fat adaptation term gets thrown around loosely. What people are looking for is keto adaptation. Fat adaptation is simply the body's ability to create ketones through beta oxidation. So we can become fat adapted essentially incredibly quickly. We can be burning fat, creating ketones, and we can be wasting ketones through our breath and through the urine in the form of acetone and acetoacetate. And that's brilliant. That shows that we're on the journey. But acetoacetate and acetone are wasted products. So as we adapt, the body begins to waste less of these, and we utilize more as beta hydroxybutyrate. So initially, if we're testing ketones from the urine strips or the breath monitors, that's a fantastic tool to understand that you're doing things correctly. If you're cross-referencing this against blood glucose, then brilliant. But as you adapt into the journey, these readings will become less and less because your body is adapted. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. And this was a massive issue for me when I was gravitating into the journey, because I was adamant that I hadn't strayed. I was doing everything the way that I should, but my ketone levels were dropping. And this led to a stress situation, which ended up increasing blood glucose, and it was causing a whole other host of problems. So don't become stressed with that. As the body adapts, it's going to produce and utilize beta hydroxybutyrate. It does this through upregulating the monocarboxylate transporters and the enzymes BDH, ACAT, and SCOT. You can test for that on the blood, but then if I test mine now, mine is incredibly low. It's probably less than 0.5. Which a lot of people think as being, the minimum, the entry point to being ketogenic. And personally, I think it's a fallacy. I think we should resign to the fact that the levels are whatever the levels are, as long as we're eating healthy. Mine are typically, sometimes I don't read anything on a ketone blood monitor. Sometimes it may be 0.3, 0.4, but I don't care, because I'm eating the way that I should. I'm eating an evolutionary appropriate diet. It doesn't matter if my ketone level is high or low. And I don't test blood anymore. The only time that I tested my blood glucose was when I had that continuous blood glucose monitor, and I did a run at Kempton Park, and I put that on to we did a little thing on it, Steve, didn't we? I tested a few different things to see what effect it had on the blood glucose. But the biggest thing for me was how my body created glucose through gluconeogenesis and the lactate in the muscle from something like 3.6 before, which is technically a hypoglycemic range, but obviously it's not for me. I went up to 10.6 or something in 40 minutes. And there was a guy there who was a carb athlete who was carbing up, and his had dropped. So I'm an athlete, well, not an athlete, but a person who runs, who doesn't consume carbs. And my blood glucose was higher at the end of the race than it was at the beginning. I haven't tested since then, which is the best. I think depends on where you are on your journey. Both are an indication. The cheapest option, if you are new to the journey, is going to be the urine strips. The breath monitors can be expensive. The urine strips are throwaway. There's 100 in a tub. They're a couple of pound a box, a tube, and it doesn't matter. It's a cheap way to test, but ultimately you don't need to. You'll know when you're producing ketones because you'll feel different. Your mental focus, your mental clarity will be better. Inflammation won't be as high. I know when I'm doing things right, and I know when I'm not doing them right. But I'm a lover of the test strips. If you are testing and you're gravitating in initially, they're cheap and cheerful. It'll give you an idea. It'll teach you the foods that are eliciting that insulin response, because as soon as insulin is elevated by the blood glucose, the ketones are going to come down. So that's the cheapest way that you can learn what types of foods are eliciting that response. I was going to bring out my own brand of breath monitors, but the more I looked into it, they're super expensive. They're not that accurate, at least I believe. And then I gravitated into buying like the Keto Mojo. We stocked a version of that for a long time. And they're fantastic tools, but ultimately, I don't think you need to test. As long as you're ticking all the boxes, then, your ketone levels and your blood glucose are what they are. And also, and Stephen can jump in on this, the blood glucose will increase as we adapt also. The reticulocyte count increases. The red blood cell lives longer. So we don't need to create as much red blood cells from the reticulocyte. So our blood glucose can increase, which is why a lot of these studies that are pushed out recently show that or claim that being ketogenic and carnivore can create type 2 diabetes, for example. But it's a fallacy. It's just because we're healthier, we're fitter, the cells are living longer. But it's been a long time since I've tested.
Dr. Epps?
I don't really have anything to add, to be honest. I think that's a really good answer. I would say, just in addition, don't get fixated on glucose and ketones. Consider how you physically feel. Consider if you're going to the gym, does it take you longer to get tired? If you are, doing interval training, can you now do more intervals? If you're at work, do you feel as though you can work for longer before you feel tired? I would say these are the really important things because they tell you what is the sum total of your whole body and what's going on in all the processes. Glucose and ketones are a part of that, which you can test. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But please remember that it's a part of a bigger picture, and how you feel is more important.
I think that's fabulous. I will put a link to my video which explains why the HbA1c goes up on this way of eating, and it is zero to do with becoming diabetic. And this links into the answer that I would have, because your blood glucose could look fantastic. How much insulin are you producing to make that look fantastic? And that's a really key issue. In fact, if you were testing insulin levels, you would know you've got a problem probably 20 years before you find out you've got a problem with diabetes, because what's happening, and just a simple experiment, just think this to yourself. Let's say you needed 5 milligrams of sugar in 5 litres of blood, or a teaspoon of sugar in your blood. And for 20 years, that was working great. You would think this is all hunky-dory, but you might be looking at yourself in the mirror, as Dr. Abs has just said, or, Richard has mentioned, but you're not feeling great. And you think, well, what's been going on? Or you're getting fatter. This is my story. Now, if I'd have been looking at my insulin, I'd never have got to that period of time where I'm thinking, what's going wrong? Because 10 years previously, I would see that I need double the amount of insulin to get the same result in my blood sugar. And I know there's a problem there, because why is my body suddenly pumping up more insulin? So I don't want to get into any more of that. I will put in the description, and also the other things we've talked about will all be in the description, but my video about the HbA1c and what I'm talking about will be in there. So, right, okay, great. Matthew, another good question, actually. This is coming up a lot recently. What are Dr. Ab's thoughts on boron?
Well, it's an essential nutrient, just like many things. But again, it's not something to get fixated on. In terms of the benefits, you've got things like bone health, hormone regulation. It's anti-inflammatory. It can help with cognition, lots of different things. But it's a cofactor, again, used in enzymatic reactions, just like another one would be something like magnesium, as an example. But too much, again, can be toxic. So once you have too much, you can then create things like hormone imbalances. If you have time, look up the link between boron and estradiol levels, or E2. And it can actually shift hormone imbalances, because people get fixated on taking it and they actually end up taking more than they need. And so I would say the most important thing when you're asking about any nutrient, not just boron, is remember that it doesn't change what you actually do. Because what you do is still eat the diet that we are all fans of if we're here today, in the right amount, and getting the right lifestyle choices in, and your nutrients will take care of themselves. If there is a true problem and a deficiency, Stephen coming on this, I don't know of any specific clearance test or ability to test if you have enough boron. I don't know if that's something you've ever had to do at all.
No, I've never had to do that.
Yeah. So there is toxicity and there is risks of hormone imbalance. If you need it, fine. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone where I've really suspected boron, a massive boron deficiency, or even seen massive boron toxicity, to be honest. If you are getting toxicity, look at hormone imbalances, look at kidney damage potentially as well. That's another one. But I don't think it's anything to fixate on. Please just carry on eating the same diet.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason I didn't get into that, you can test for serum boron, and you can definitely have a urine test for boron. I don't want people to get into this because, I think that you're really going down a rabbit hole, and you can get into hair analysis, which I'm not a big fan of at all, for many other reasons, and we're running out of time. So, yeah, right, great. Pam, Project Pam, it's good to see you. What type of implants do you recommend? Titanium or porcelain?
So the actual implant is the bit that screws into the bone. The tooth, in layman's terms, is what we call a crown. So you have the implant, which goes in, which you don't see because it's covered up by the gum, and the crown attaches to the top. The implant is titanium and the crown is porcelain, assuming you don't want a gold crown or something like that. So it's not a choice. It's both together. The porcelain goes on top of the implant.
Cool. Right. Now, Richard, you snuck in that you've got an experiment and we might talk about it. So let's talk about it. You mentioned there's an experiment.
Yeah. Just really quickly, I can see Lisa's popped a question in about calcium intake. And she's obviously curious of Dr. Ab's intake on this. Can we get into that? Have we got time?
Yeah, I can read that out. I was actually trying to get a quick thing about your experiment and then come back to that as the last question. But okay, I'm currently far from healthy. After being super fit and healthy all my life, I suddenly lost my ability to walk and talk at age 52. I have been carnivore for just over a year and I've not made improvements as yet. I gave in this week and asked my doctor for a muscle relaxer and painkiller because of the tormented tightness and burning pain in my calf. To limit my calcium intake, I don't eat eggs or dairy except butter and ghee. I only eat beef, lamb and some bacon. Does Dr. Abs have any thoughts on how I can get my calf muscles to relax? I am taking extra vitamin K2 and magnesium plus using a vibration plate and getting myofascial release massage therapy done.
Okay. Can I jump in quickly before you give an answer to this? There's a history in regards to this, and I think the two of you know I'm not a big fan of calcium supplementation, but calcium is imperative. It's one of 6 compounds that makes up 99% of the mass within the body. It's essential. We can't live without calcium. It's essential for the conversion of 25-hydroxyvitamin D into calcitriol, which is the active form of D3. So we need calcium for all of these things. The reason I think this has come up is because I used to suffer with leg cramps. And I've thinged it back to my calcium intake because calcium is excitatory to the muscle and magnesium calms the muscle. And in the cell, it's roughly a 1-to-1 ratio, but a standard diet is heavily dominated in calcium. I don't think in a normal setting that it needs to be that high, but I think like our friend Jonathan from Team GB thinks that I'm anti-calcium. I'm not anti-calcium. I think it's situation specific, and I think it's different from person to person. So my advice initially with Lisa was to look at calcium intake to stop this excitatory part of the cell. But given the fact that she's done this, and I don't know what your thoughts are, and you might have a lot to come into, especially with the vitamin K2 also, but I'd experiment with increasing the calcium. Maybe you're not getting enough. And I know that goes against everything that I've been saying about calcium, but this is specific. You've tried reducing the calcium. I would maybe think about putting some back in. But that's a little background. That's a bit of background in regards to where Lisa's coming with that. But I'm certainly not anti-calcium. It's essential for life, for many processes in the body. But I'm always, when we look at calcium, magnesium, excessive magnesium, supplementation or ingestion will only cause gut issues, but excessive calcium consumption can cause way more problems, especially with the heart. So that's why I'm always concerned with supplementing with calcium. But from a dietary perspective, if we look as nature intended, if we look at a piece of beef or a piece of lamb and organ meats, the way that the electrolytes are split in there, the minerals, it predominates potassium. and then it drops right down. Potassium's about 4 times higher typically than sodium, and then it drops right down to magnesium, and then generally calcium sits just below magnesium, but it's pretty close to an even ratio. The only time that this is different is when we give birth to something. Mother's breast milk or an egg will contain higher levels of calcium, but it's there for a reason. Beyond that, I'm always thinking about consuming excessive amounts of calcium, but I think it is very much specific to the individual. Context is incredibly important, and I just feel maybe that potentially increasing calcium from a dietary perspective could be a way forward to test that.
I'd agree. You'll never know until you try things. What I would do, Lisa, is there's a few things. So first of all, if you want something directly to act on the calf, this is something I've done for many patients in the past. I can actually use Botox in the calf muscle itself, and that gives an immediate relaxation. Now, it's not relaxation to the point where you can't walk. Obviously, it's targeted in specific areas. Now, usually I've done this in the context of a cosmetic improvement because some women don't like to have big calves. And so you relax it and you get this slight atrophy. But you can use it for things like what you've said to really force the relaxation. And it's a much nicer way than using systemic tablets which force muscle relaxation, because you don't know what the side effects are, you know what else is being affected. If you treat the calf muscle directly, the rest of your body isn't having anything done because that botulinum toxin is getting to work within 60 seconds and then it's just gone. Nothing else is being affected. So for a direct option, look at that. It's also not that difficult, because there's good safety margins around the muscle. It's a thick muscle. It's not going to spread too far. So really anyone near you that has done it in the past, just go for them. In terms of what Richard said, yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think I disagree with anything. I would say spend a little bit of time understanding how muscles actually contract and relax. Look into how calcium will bind to troponin. Once you have this change, you've got this tropomyosin head that moves away, exposing the binding site, all these sorts of things. When you look into that, you'll understand how calcium has an interplay with things like magnesium. Because when you look at enzymes like ATPase, which is utilized in this context, these specific enzymes like ATPase are magnesium dependent. So you get things like magnesium dependent ATPase enzymes, and that's why it starts with calcium and it can end with magnesium in these processes. So look at the cofactors that calcium interacts with and try and work out how much of those you're having as well, because calcium doesn't work on its own. So you can try depleting it, you can try increasing it, but try and look at the other things that go with it as well, if possible. And then just continue experimenting. At the end of the day, you're not taking any drugs for this, specifically for the calcium. As long as you're taking enough vitamin K2, you should be safe. But look at the other things like magnesium. That I think Richard would echo as well.
Yeah, I want to just add something, just being responsible. You say you suddenly lost your ability to walk and talk at age 52, but you also mentioned you're seeing a doctor. I mean, that is a serious thing to suddenly happen at age 52. And I would imagine, and I'm hoping that they have done some serious investigations for other things that could possibly be the cause of that. So
neurological.
Yeah, we're not giving you doctors' advice. It's not one-to-one patient advice, but that is such a stark comment that, and I'm not wishing to scare you. We're just being responsible here. That you need to try and find out what caused that. That's the first thing, because the knock-on effect could be this stiffness. Personally, I feel I would be tested for folate, vitamin B9, and I would definitely get the MTHFR gene defect ruled out. I would get that genetic test done as well, because the reduced folate availability is absolutely classic. One of the symptoms of that is lower legs cramp. So rule things out, but I'm hoping the doctors would have already done that. But anyway, right. So that's that. I hope that was helpful. We have gone over time, but I do want Richard, because he did do that little teaser, to say that they've got this experiment going. So let's have a little listen to that. What's your experiment?
So I'm going to pass the bucket. I'm going to bounce it over to Dr. Abs just in case he doesn't want to mention it. But yeah.
No, go for it. Go for it, please.
I'll leave you lead the way. I'll leave.
So I bought Richard's ketones. I bought the vanilla flavor, and then he sent me some samples of the raspberry flavor very kindly. And I wanted to do a quantitative analysis on what it's doing in the body. because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't a placebo, what I was feeling. So I've done a couple of experiments already, and I'm doing another one, which is a bit more invasive, which is coming up very, very soon. The experiment I did so far was to take a baseline blood test, basically just a finger prick test, and then look at my glucose level and ketone level, take the raspberry bomb exogenous ketones, and then measure it roughly 45 to 60 minutes later. And I mean, I haven't got the results exactly here. They're on one of my phones, but I think on one of them, it's more than doubled. So it does exactly what it says on the tin. But I measured so far the start and the finish with slightly different time points. So I don't know when the peak is and what the shape of the curve is. So what I'm going to do very soon is take a baseline reading, ingest the ketones, and then every 5 minutes, I'm going to be taking a blood reading of glucose and ketones and mapping that out on a chart so people can see the rise and how long it lasts and etc. Obviously, that's going to be me, and it's not going to be exactly the same curve in everyone, but they can see that it does work. And I know for a fact it does work. I can say that hand on heart because I've got the data on this phone here with all the readings. And that's going to be a video on my channel probably within the next couple of weeks.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. And just for those that are listening and interesting, Lisa has said that she's asked her doctor she's just asked a doctor for the MTHFR gene test. So that's great. Thank you for following today. I really appreciate everybody being in the room. Sorry, we're going to just plug the Skool community for those that are listening on the audio podcast. If you want to take part, be in the room asking questions, then it's just $4 a month. That's less than $8 a week. We do a monthly 8 p.m. live question and answer for an hour. We also are available after our hour. We do on YouTube on Sunday at 7 p.m. At 8 p.m. we do a Sunday extra time, 30 minutes, myself and Richard. And every first Thursday of the month, we have the guest here, Dr. Abs, will be doing a special sort of visit every single month. All that for just $4. You've also got 9 free courses that you can take part in about keto or about protein, LDL cholesterol. There's free ebooks. There's so much you can do. It's unbelievable. And all you've got to do is click on the link and you can become part of our wonderful community. So it just remains for me to say thank you to Richard and thank you to Dr. Abs. If you both want to do some closing comments, Richard first and then Dr. Abs obviously to finish as he's top of the bill.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you all for joining as always. And thank you to Dr. Abs. What an awesome episode. I can't wait to re-listen to this on the replay. Some incredible information and I can't wait. You and I are recording on Sunday.
We are. I was just about to say, we are meeting up in London. We're going to do a big recording going through all the things that Richard has done in his career from a sports perspective, specifically through the lens of diet, sleep, recovery, exogenous ketones, all these sorts of things. And it's going to be very, very detailed. It'll probably be around 3 hours. So yeah, it's because I don't do half-hearted 30-second sound bites. So we're going to go really, really deep on these things. And I've just interviewed this morning the captain of the England cricket team, who was captain a little while ago, Adam Hollyoake. Again, same thing. That was about 3 hours. And I'm on the way, because some of my patients are Premiership footballers. So I'm trying to convince them to come on as well. So if you're interested, that's coming too. And I want Richard to come, if possible, more than once, because I think we've got so many things to talk about. We'll be there all day. So this Sunday is going to be all about Richard. And then afterwards, I want to do another episode with him talking about specifically C8, ketones, and electrolytes. So we've got plenty in the works for you all.
Fantastic. I think, is 3 hours going to be enough?
You can do 2 questions, Richard. Amazing.
I can't wait. Can't wait.
Yes.
It's going to be.
I can't believe Dr. Abs didn't give me a name check because I think I'm coming down in about.
You are indeed. You are. So when Stephen comes, what we're going to do there is basically go through lots and lots of case histories. So I want to see what he's learned as a result of coaching so many people into carnivore. So what difficulties have these people face? What common problems, what common criticisms do these people get thrown at them from people around them? Miracle stories of people who have turned their life around, how he's adapted it for people for general health and people for sport and everything in between. I think that's going to be really interesting as well. And I'm taking you both to a really fantastic meat buffet restaurant beforehand as well, or after.
Oh, fabulous. I didn't know that. Anyway, everyone, thank you for listening. Dr. Abs, Richard, please stay on the line and we'll just finish the meeting now. Thanks, everyone, for all your great questions.